Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, the Maryland General Assembly passed 834 legislative bills, but how many are worth the paper they're printed on? Growing business, another marijuana facility wants to open up on the Eastern Shore. Should the $9 million man, David Trone, be elected to Congress? And why did the Senate race between Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen take a nasty turn? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by Democratic insider Sam Statland, former chairman of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, former school board candidate Laurie Halverson, and political strategist Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. To say that America is a nation of laws is an understatement. Some 2,800 bills were introduced and over 800 were passed during the 90-day term of the Maryland General Assembly that concluded this week. Some of the bills that were passed are more money for Baltimore to demolish vacant buildings. Maryland's divorce laws were updated to eliminate the need for a witness in uncontested divorces. Maryland expanded the ignition interlock for drunk driving. PG County won big, with the state agreeing to support the building of a new Prince George's County Regional Hospital and a new transportation scoring system to prioritize transportation projects was passed. Increased number in the circuit court judges by 13, but the most important one was the bee bill that was passed that bans certain pesticides from home use to protect the bee population. This bill received heavy support from the Ant and Cockroach Union. There were bills that did not pass but are likely to be brought up again. They were the Death with Dignity legislation that would have made Maryland the 6th state to allow end-of-life options. There was an increase proposal for in cigarette taxes that was defeated, and the Poultry Litter Management Act that would have increased chicken farmers' cost of waste disposal. Mark, what was the most significant achievement of this General Assembly?
I think actually this is the second year, reflection of having Larry Hogan as governor. This is the second year that we haven't had any tax increase. We didn't get the tax cut that we should have gotten, but we didn't have a tax increase. It's something we'd had for the 8 prior years. So I think that's the most significant accomplishment.
Laurie, what single bill was not passed that should have been?
The tax cut. I am disappointed that they didn't pass the tax cut because that really would have been a big help for families, and it didn't happen. So maybe next year.
Susan, it's always fascinating to watch the tug of war between the leaders of the General Assembly and the governor. Who won this year?
I think the General Assembly did. I mean, they started out by overturning the governor's vetoes for a lot of things, including that Marriott bill, or the hotel bill. And then they implemented 6 days prior, which is rarely used in legislation. But the governor is forced to sign bills 6 days. He's got them 6 days, so they have a chance to overturn them right away. So they did a lot of things. The thing that I think the governor got that I was a little surprised that teachers have been fighting for years, and that's that low-income families can get $5,000 towards private school education, and that would probably be the governor's one big one that he got.
Sam, the legislature generally rejected efforts by Governor Hogan to reduce taxes and spending. Is that a signal that it's business as usual in Annapolis? And how will voters react since they don't like big taxes?
After the assembly was over, either Bush or Miller suggested extending the session just to talk about this tax issue, which I thought was a fairly good idea, but it got handily rejected. I think overall the governor gets good marks. I think that in general people voted for him because of his positions on taxes and business management, et cetera, and how to run government. And therefore I don't think he did too badly, and he still has other sessions that come.
Well, we saw this with Bob Ehrlich when he was first elected, that the first 2 years generally went pretty smooth. But then as you start the third year and opened up the election season, then the General Assembly and the governor had very bad relations. Are we likely to see that, Mark?
I don't think so. I think that one of the lessons that Larry Hogan has learned compared with Bob Ehrlich is to be more prudent, more careful in picking his battles. I think sometimes Ehrlich got himself drawn into fights that he really didn't need to get into, whereas Larry Hogan focuses on what his priorities are and sometimes lets things go by that are not as important to him.
He also has a lot of goodwill right now, having just licked cancer, we hope. And there is a lot of goodwill. I think, in a year down the road when he's healthy and stuff, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be tougher next year and even tougher the year after. And by next year, at the time, this time of the year, there'll be people chomping at the bits to run against him.
But he has an awful lot of goodwill with the public. His ratings are the highest that we've seen with any governor for years. And I think that goes to his election. So we'll have to see how the electorate feels. I think you're going to see that, on the 26th, how people vote for different candidates in different situations, and we'll see who wins.
But he hasn't taken really any sides. He's not endorsed a presidential candidate. I mean, he was a big Christie person. Right. And I saw with interest that Bob Ehrlich has endorsed Kasich. But he has not taken a side, so maybe that's the way you stay neutral and you don't get people angry with you.
Get your head cut off.
Yeah.
But I attended a commercial real estate forum this week, and one of the shocking things that, again, it's not new news, but it's old news, is the lack of commercial development in the state of Maryland. There is particularly compared to Virginia, and you see the growth around Tyson's Corner and out the Dulles corridor. It'll really explode once the Silver Line is completed out to Dulles. Maryland doesn't have, and this is not my terms, this was the terms of the presenters, that they don't have a strong economic development team.
Except that if you look at out in Virginia, and Virginians are beginning to take maybe a step back, if you go out there, there's a lot of empty buildings. So you have buildings, but
buildings follow jobs, and that's where Maryland
I hate to ruin your opinion with facts, Susan, but there's a 16% vacancy rate in Montgomery County.
And it's higher up.
No, there's only a 9% vacancy rate in Fairfax and Loudoun County. When we come back, we have to go to our next topic, which is in 2015, and let's talk about economic growth and development. The state of Maryland created the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission to administer 109 dispensaries and 15 cultivation permits. According to Marijuana Business Daily, exactly, Marijuana Business Daily, the most trusted cannabis business news source since 2011, the application process for Maryland business license in the state is a microcosm of the larger industry, reflecting its vast potential, the changing dynamics of the business, and get this, the eagerness of entrepreneurs to get involved. No kidding. Maryland is poised to become one of the largest medical cannabis markets east of Colorado, and it shows. The state recently received over 1,000 applications for permits, including 800 for dispensaries and 150 for cultivation. Laurie, Washington County, which is proudly conservative, voters haven't backed a Democrat for president since 1964, and same-sex marriage lost by a landslide in a referendum 3 years ago. But when Chicago-based Green Thumb Industries pitched a proposal to put a medical marijuana production plant there, the county's 5 commissioners, all Republicans, passed a resolution unanimously supporting the plan. Is it just about the money?
I think it's a lot about the money because I know it grew their jobs. They're going to have 100 more jobs in their local area, and they'll get $4 to $7 million more money into their local area. So I think that a lot of it is because of that. However, one of my friends who's a mom is actually one of the people that submitted an application for a dispensary, and which kind of surprised me. So I know a lot of people are trying to get in on the action, but the you've got to look at what happens downstream, and I really am concerned that down the road we're going to see some major issues with this. In Colorado, for example, the number of children who are smoking or using marijuana in some way has increased. They have, I think it was about 9% of the kids are using marijuana in Colorado versus the average is like 6.7% in the United States. So that is there's a difference there, and I'm concerned that it's going to hurt children the most. And if there's anything that hurts kids, really, why are we doing it?
Well,
But
right now we're just talking about medical marijuana.
The medical marijuana.
Well,
These companies are extremely well run. They made presentations to anyone who would listen to them, showing them great PowerPoint presentations on the economic benefit to the area where they would set up, how they were set up, security, putting out that they're professional, that you have agronomists, that they're developing different strains, that they're willing to work with hospitals, that they're willing to work with private care physicians in order to get product out there that will really help people. And I think that's why, on top of poor economies on the Eastern Shore and in Western Maryland, why they've gotten support.
But Sam, this we went back and forth when the bill was being debated. It's the camel's nose under the tent. And here's a good example. Susan, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is considering legalizing the recreational use of cannabis all across Canada, nationwide. And he's going to create a task force comprised of representatives from the federal, provincial, and municipal governments to discuss legalization. Is that what we can expect? Are we going down the slippery slope to legalization?
I hope not. And there has been discussion of this for several years in the legislature, and there's a big difference. And it's ironic. I spent like 5 minutes watching television today, and it was a conversation about this very topic, that it is an entryway drug, and that's my concern. And I don't think you can assume there are a lot of places that have medical marijuana. And having had many family members who could have used it dying from cancer, I think medical marijuana is great. But I think that when that time comes, when those conversations come, it's up to the citizens of Maryland to speak up.
We all have debated the medical marijuana use, and there are recognizable benefits from using it. But the real issue, though, is society changing their attitudes about marijuana in general. And are we going to go to legalization of marijuana? And
there's a proposal.
Again, the problem of going into creating more drug addiction later on.
But
In Colorado, I was fascinated before they had the legal marijuana, taking my daughter out to University of Colorado Boulder, how open and how brazen the medical marijuana promotion was.
Wafting
there were
across the campus?
flyers, well, yes, but they were flyers and process and what have you. It was a very loose, lax process, and I think that set the stage for what ultimately happened in Colorado.
And they're packaging it in packages for children that look like they're for children, like Hashi's Bar and
Do you know what's
Oreos.
This is
Oreo
the
cookies.
legal stuff.
And you know we have
not
Yes.
the medical stuff.
you have
Sam.
legislation introduced in Congress that would declassify marijuana
Yes,
as a controlled
but
substance.
what's interesting is in the legislature this year, they did a lot of decriminalization and changing of punishment. So at the point now where a lot of people are gone to prison for a little bit of pot, now they'll be able to get out and do the same thing
or
over
just
and
pay a
not get
ticket
arrested.
and keep on going.
Yep.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, and we're going to be talking about it for a long time to come, and it will be a cash crop somewhere. When we come back from this short break, why are Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen arm wrestling over this congressional seat? Stay tuned. And welcome back. The Washington Post reported that liberal Democratic businessman David Trone has spent over $9 million of his own money in his bid for the 8th Congressional District seat. This is an astonishing amount of money when you consider that in 2014, the most expensive self-funded candidate, Tom MacArthur of New Jersey, he only spent $5 million. Sam, it's been said over and over this is a competitive race with many candidates running. Is Trone's millions going to buy him a congressional seat?
I don't know whether it'll buy him a seat or not, but the combination of Kathleen Matthews' massive TV ads along with his certainly has, it seems, increased voter turnout. Across the state of Maryland in early voting, it's the largest turnout for any presidential primary we've had, and over the last election, it's almost a 3-to-1 turnout. And will that benefit them? I don't know, but what I do think is that a good, strong grassroots campaign, people on the street knocking on doors, will benefit Jamie Raskin. And I think that this is going to turn out to be a race between Jamie Raskin and Kathleen Matthews, and I'm still giving Raskin the edge.
Mark, there is historical data that shows self-funded candidates haven't done very well, generally, about 11%. In this era of expensive campaigns, are we likely to see more self-funded candidates? And I have to say, I almost feel like there's something questionable about someone who's willing to spend so much money in pursuit of elective office.
Well, there's a point, the economics of advertising in the short time that elections take place, there's a point of diminishing returns, and there does come a point where you've seen the ad just once. I mean, you've got it, you've got the message, and it's just not as effective as it would otherwise be. And I think you picked up on some of that when you do the comparison. Last 2 years ago, the governor's race was about $30 million spent, of which 20%, about $6 million, so less than Trone spent, was the amount that was spent by Hogan. So sometimes if you have a message and you're competitive, you need that. You don't necessarily need to be the highest spending candidate.
It's also going to, I think the difference in this race could be is if the old-time activist type people come out. If you talk to the old-time activists, the people who've been around, even 10 years.
Hardcore.
The hardcore Democrats, they are miffed at his arrogance of coming in and buying the race. And if he were to win, I think he would be defeated the next time, because those old time, and there are already people talking about running, and I don't think he will do it. I think that might benefit Jamie Raskin based on what Sam said, which is the street brigade and all that stuff, and
guys.
all of his lawn signs on private lawns, is that Kathleen and David, I think, are going to be going like this, at each other, the same base. However, we will see she is really playing up the Washington Post endorsement and the fact that she is the only woman.
But couldn't this
I
be,
directly answer
couldn't
your
this
question?
be the reality that there's a new wave of Democratic candidates, and that the old liberal left no longer can carry the day?
Well, we might
I
say
don't
the
think it
same
has to do
about
with
Donald
liberal
Trump
left.
on the
Sure it is.
Why?
What about Donald Trump on the Republican side?
Let's talk about this race.
But you can't just blame
Let's
it
talk
on
about
Democrats.
It's the issue of
Republic-
outsiders.
thing.
We need
I'm not
people want to
blaming
vote for an
To
outsider.
keep one thing, I got to answer one question that
Yeah.
you asked. Why would you spend $9 million?
Because you have it.
Because you have to remember that all members of Congress can insider trade. And if I'm sitting on an Armed Forces Committee, ladies and gentlemen, and I know that Boeing or Northrop Grumman is going to get a great deal on a contract, and I have an extra $1 million laying around, and I'm going to invest that, and that stock triples, I'm going to make $3 million. So to invest $9 million for the
suggesting a very
potential kinds of returns
that's a very
are
nefarious
absolutely
allegation. that Mr.
Nefarious, my ass. Bills have been submitted on this topic.
Well, but-
Nobody is willing to introduce legislation to prevent members of Congress from insider trading.
All right,
There's
It's
a Democratic
disgusting.
member from Florida who has an ethics violation because he was running a hedge fund
Right.
while he was a member.
That's outrageous.
It is outrageous.
But I
And
think
what's
it
also
could be
out-
that, with young, wealthy people, I mean, we've seen it before, and the Republican side too, with Donald Trump. And, it's going to
had
be
to get
interesting.
that in
I
Look, it's
did.
Republican.
Donald Trump is doing the same thing. And it's interesting because David Trone, in his first ad, said something about he isn't going to be Trump, to show that he's different than
And right
Donald.
now, the Republicans control both houses, and they will not let a bill out of committee that would prevent insider trading.
All
What
right,
does that
well,
say?
well, we got one more race to talk
It's
about.
actually already illegal under the ethics
We
rule.
got one more race to talk about, and this is a significant
ethics.
one because there's been significant happenings in the last week. And according to the Washington Post, Racial split lines defines Maryland's hotly contested Democratic Senate primary between Representatives Donna Edwards and Chris Van Hollen. The Washington Post University of Maryland poll shows Edwards with a 4% lead, whereas an NBC Marist poll has Van Hollen leading by 6. Then the race became really interesting as Van Hollen-affiliated union-backed group called Committee for Maryland's Progress purchased broadcast airtime in Baltimore to air an ad that argues that Representative Edwards is ranked one of the least effective members of Congress. Right after that, an Edwards group called Working for Us began a new spot claiming Chris Van Hollen crafted a loophole for the National Rifle Association. Susan, why did this race take such a nasty turn?
Chris Van Hollen is a very capable legislator and a leader in Congress. And it all started when Donna Edwards started accusing him of being an insider and a leader, and that was wrong. And then it got worse. And she said that he's such an insider that he doesn't get anything done. The Washington Post came out, endorsements started coming for her, including the Congressional Black Caucus didn't endorse her. And the facts started coming out that she is the least effective person probably in Congress. And as a result, it has gotten nasty, especially on the Edwards side. And she is basing her ads now that she puts out, not facts, saying that it's her story that makes her, not the fact that she's gotten anything done, which she hasn't. It's a story. She is an African-American single mom, and she can represent this state better, and the Senate needs a black senator.
Sam, isn't the reason that this is really nasty is that the possibility that Donna Edwards can win?
No.
No, I don't think. Recent polls, the most recent polls, the history of the polls showed Chris ahead by big numbers. Then Donna went ahead, narrowly. And now Chris is going ahead. So the momentum, I think, at this point in time seems to favor Chris. I think that that's what caused negative. The best way to turn that around is to come up with negative advertising, which is what the Edwards campaign and its PACs did, to the point where for the first time in history that anybody can remember, the White House said that the ad that she ran against Chris was so unfair and so unreasonable
And they cut it.
so misleading that he demanded that ad be taken down, and it was.
We gotta wrap it up.
Well, one more point.
Quickly.
Folks, I've said to you that Donna Edwards doesn't deserve to be elected dog catcher. That's based on personal experience of working with her as a congresswoman and Chris Van Hollen, and I stand by that.
Well, you got the last word. You can deliver your lawsuits to Silver Spring, Maryland. Stay tuned for parting shots.
Tide's turning.
Hey, welcome back. Now with parting shots, Sam Statland. Do you have anything left?
I do. in keeping up with our comments, talking about the Van Hollen-Edwards race, a big boo to Emily's List for promoting a candidate and spending a lot of money only because she's a woman. Folks, can we get beyond race? Can we get beyond anything except a competent candidate? We need competent people running this country, and Chris Van Hollen is much more competent than his opponent.
Thank you, Sam. Susan Heltemes, your parting shot.
Well, my parting shot regarding that race is over. So, as we tape it today is the 61st anniversary of the first opening of a McDonald's. And so I wish a happy birthday to McDonald's. And this week also was the anniversary of the birth of Casey Aiken. So I wish a happy birthday to Casey Aiken and McDonald's. We won't say which is older.
well, thank you. Laurie Halverson, your parting shot, please.
Just want to remind everybody that you have until the 21st for early voting. That started yesterday. And also want to mention that we have a new voting location for early voting, and that's the Potomac Community Center. And yesterday it had the third highest number of voters, which was a nice surprise.
Thank you, Laurie. And Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Casey, sometimes in the back and forth with the legislature, attention isn't played to the issues that get nonpartisan support. One of the successes, and actually Susan referenced it obliquely, was a piece of legislation that addressed criminal justice reform that went through on a bipartisan basis. It changed penalties, it put more emphasis on treatment. So I applaud the legislature for that particular change.
Amen.
Well, thank you, everybody. I want to thank everyone for being here. This is a great spirited debate. We've got 2 weeks before the election. I hope everyone gets excited about it and goes out and get ready to vote. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken. And remember, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can watch us on YouTube. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.